All right, we're at 1.6, continuous domain and range. For this one, very similar to discrete, except now we're going to be writing domain and range in interval notation and inequality notation for continuous graphs. Now to review, discrete is when our points are not connected. Continuous is when our points are connected. All right, so we use inequality notation when we have continuous graph. Now when we use inequality notation, that means we're going to be using our inequality symbols. Now the reason I put only these two symbols is when you write domain and range in inequality notation, it's always going to be in this form where we have the lowest on the left side and the highest number or value on the right side. So if that's true, then our inequality symbols will always face the same direction. The only thing that will be changing is X if we're talking about domain and Y if we're talking about range. It is very similar to inequality notation. So for this one, we can also write it in interval notation, or we do use parentheses and the boxy bracket. And we can use one, the other, or we can use both, a mixture of both of them when we write in inequality notation. For example, this one. All right, so when we have included values is when we have a closed circle. Our excluded values are the values that our graph will get super close to, but it'll never end up being that number. So we need to distinguish what that is, and we use that. And notice how our inequalities do not have that equal sign because they're excluded. They're not equal to. So let's go ahead and put not equal. Infinity. Infinity is never included. So whenever you have the negative infinity or infinity symbol, you will always either use parentheses or the inequalities without that that equal sign below them. We have a linear function and it has arrows at both ends. When we have arrows, that means we're going to infinity. So for our domain, we're going to first write it in inequality notation. We're looking at our x-axis, and because there's arrows, it's going to negative infinity. And on the right side, it's going to positive infinity. So because we're looking at our domain, which is our x, we're going to first start off with our inequality symbols going the same direction. The lowest is negative infinity, and then my highest value will be positive infinity because of those arrows. Because we never include infinity, then there's no need for us to put an equal sign under those inequality signs. Let's go ahead and look at our range. Range is our y values. Remember, we start from the bottom to the top. Let's set up our range with our inequality symbols. And because there's an arrow, there's really no minimum because it goes from negative infinity to positive infinity. And again, because infinity is never included, we do not need to put those inequality symbols under it. So we write our interval notation. We've got lowest value on the left and highest value here. Because inequality notation already lends itself to that, let's go ahead and start it. Negative infinity, comma to positive infinity. We never include infinity, so that is where we use our parentheses. And that's how you represent domain in interval notation. Now let's look at the range. We've got the lowest, negative infinity. Our highest is positive infinity. And then because infinity is never included, we use parentheses to represent that. We have a quadratic function. And for domain, we look at our x values. This one looks like it's going from negative infinity. There's an arrow on this side also, so positive infinity. So we go, let's start it off by x, put our inequality symbols. Our lowest is negative infinity, and our highest is positive infinity. So let's go negative infinity to positive infinity. And then let's go on. So we start from the bottom to the top. From the bottom, because there are arrows, the lowest will be, notice on the top, my graph doesn't go past 4. So that's going to be our maximum, which is 4 here. We never include negative infinity, so there's no equal sign under there. But if you notice, there is a point at 4. So because it is equal to also 4, then we need to put that equal sign there. So for interval notation, we do our lowest on the left. That one matches that one. Put our comma, and then we get our highest, which is infinity. And because we never include infinity, we put those parentheses. Now for our range, got negative infinity is our minimum, our maximum, positive 4. We never include infinity, so we have a parentheses. But because there's an equal sign under there, that means we're including it, and that's where we use our boxy bracket. For domain, we're looking at our x's. Notice how our lowest value of x is 0. Set this up. And our highest value of x, because there's nothing there, that means there's an arrow. So it's going to positive infinity. So because there's an actual point here, it's including 0, and we never include infinity, so we can leave it like that. Let's go ahead and look at my range. So for my range, the lowest y value is 0. And just like the domain, it's going off forever into infinity on the y values. And now let's look at the 0. It's including the 0, so we're going to put that equal sign to include that 0, and we never include infinity, so we leave it at that. So in interval notation, we've got 0 is the lowest, infinity is the highest. We're including the 0, not including infinity. Same thing with the range. 0 is the lowest, infinity is the highest. We don't include infinity, but we do include the 0. Okay, for our next example, notice how we have some solid points here. So for my domain, my lowest x value is negative 4, and my highest x value is positive 4. Notice how both points are solid, so it's including both negative 4 and positive 4. Okay, let's go ahead and write that down in interval notation. Range, we have negative 3 is the lowest, positive 3 is the highest, and they're both included. Okay, let's look at this next one. We've got negative notation. We've got negative 4 is the lowest, not included. Positive 5 is the highest, not included. For our range, negative 3 is not included, but positive 3 is included, so we need to include that square bracket. Okay, last example. Negative 4.5 is not included. Positive 2.5 is included. So it's all values between negative 3 and 8, including 8 for domain. Okay, let's go ahead and write that down in interval notation. Negative 4.5 is the lowest, not included. 2.5 is the highest, included. And for my domain, we've got negative 3, not included, and positive. All right. Let me know if you have any questions, and have fun with your assignment.